Welcome to this postcard size quick little miniature painting of a common spotted orchid. I'm going to be painting it with watercolours and the odd little bit of white gouache as I normally do. And the basic idea here is I'll cut out the silhouette onto Frisk masking film. I'll do this off the board I'm painting as I don't want the cut marks to go through into the board, because when you do that the paint tends to fall down the little thin crack and can make it show up. So I cut it out on a little printout of the same picture and then carefully place it into position. I haven't bothered to draw any of the individual petals of this little flower, as I'll just freehand those with the brush as I'm painting. The main purpose of this masking is so I can airbrush the background. With the airbrush there's no better way than getting a blurry background. I could have painted the background in a simplistic way, but when you've got a single subject like this lonely flower, the sharp detail really contrasts well with a completely out of focus background. And I find the watercolour paints, being very fine ground, go through the airbrush beautifully. After the background is finished and I've peeled off the mask, the painting for real begins. And my plan here is to paint a very thinned version of the colours and slowly build it up in layers. You can always put another layer on and make it a bit darker, but it's trickier with watercolour to take it off and go lighter. Some of the pigments you can do this quite successfully, but others are more permanent, and trying to remove the paint close to the masked edge would very likely damage the background, which would be a disaster. It's only until very recently I even knew these orchids existed in the British countryside. Well, not even the countryside, where I am in South London. It's very urban, with the odd green space here and there. But I've now been on a few walking trips with people who have a much better idea of this sort of thing. Have shown me a wide variety of these growing in the wild. They are very short-lived, so you have to get there at the right time, but it really is a treat when you spot one. I plan on doing more, as I've got a reasonably good photo of a bee orchid. The other ones I found I didn't manage to get such a good photo, but there's always next year when I'll be out again. In the past I would most likely have done all the fine detail with a very small brush, and the largest being a 0, but it would have more likely been a 00 or 000, or even a 10-0 as one of the brushes I've got. But here I'm using the number 3, and it's a Da Vinci Maestro, and it has quite a large belly to the bristles, but those bristles go into an incredibly long thin point. And the advantage of this is the belly of the brush can hold the paint and the water, so you can paint long lines without having to refresh it, but the long fine point allows you to do incredibly thin lines. I must say, I think I'm a convert. One thing you have to be very aware of with watercolour is the paint will dry a lot lighter than it appears when wet. This is actually quite a good thing, as it stops you painting something too dark. You can paint it, give it a minute or so to completely dry, and then if necessary you can go over it again, slowly building up the colour, as I'm pretty much doing all over. Although you have noticed there are some areas that are a lot darker, and they're the little spots that I'm confident of how strong they want to be. When it comes to the petals, they're a lot more delicate. I'm being a bit more careful. As time goes on and you're getting closer to finishing the painting, you start to get a much better idea of the values. That is how light or dark something has to be. And I'm constantly looking over the whole flower, adjusting things here and there to get that balance just right. And it's not easy. It's probably one of the hardest things to do in painting, but it is critical to get it right. It's especially common to not go dark enough. The last thing to do on this painting is the spots, and without those you couldn't call it a common spotted orchid. And once these spots are in place, there's not a great deal of scope to adjust things further, so I had to be sure the main painting had finished. The last thing I'm going to do is crispen up the edges of the petals with some white gouache. This will help to define those edges a little bit better and make the whole flower look sharp. Now all that's left is a bit of touching up here and there looking at areas that need a little bit more refinement, but also resisting the urge to fiddle too much. Something that gets overcorrected can look quite ugly. As I come to the end of this little painting, I hope you enjoyed it. Next time I'm going to be back with my Richmond Park series. That's the one where I'm painting Richmond Park every month for a year, and I don't want to get too far behind. So I really appreciate you watching, and of course you didn't sneakily scroll to the end to see the results only. I'm sure you didn't do that, but if you did, never mind. I'm still glad you're here, and it would be really great to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.